Hội chứng Việt Nam là lý do khiến nhiều người đã quay trở lại đây để bù đắp những tổn thất mà họ gây ra trong quá khứ. Trong số đó phải kể đến ông Paul George Harding, là một cựu chiến binh Mỹ thuộc Lữ đoàn Không quân 173 đã từng tham chiến tại chiến trường Bình Định, Lâm Đồng. Ông quay trở lại đây với dự án mở một lớp dạy tiếng Anh miễn phí cho người Việt. Chào ông, cảm ơn ông đã nhận lời mời tham dự cuộc trò chuyện này. Thưa ông, điều gì đã thôi thúc một người cựu chiến binh gần 70 tuổi quyết định quay trở lại Việt Nam để mở lớp dạy tiếng Anh miễn phí cho người Việt?
Remorse over that decision for many years. When I retired, when my children were all grown up, I decided that it was a good time, an opportune time for me to come back and do something positive for the people of Vietnam.
Khi biết ông quay trở lại Việt Nam với dự định như vậy, thì gia đình ông đã có phản ứng như thế nào?
My family has been completely 100% supportive of my decision.
Là một cựu chiến binh Mỹ từng tham chiến tại chiến trường Việt Nam, khi quyết định quay trở lại đây, ông có e ngại những ánh nhìn thiếu thiện cảm dành cho mình không, thưa ông?
Yes, I did have some apprehension. I knew that relations between the U.S. and the Vietnamese governments were improving, but I did have concerns about animosity toward me. But the fact that I had been very involved in the anti-war movement from the time I arrived home, I hoped would win me some sympathy. But when I did arrive, I found that the Vietnamese people, all ages, including veterans from the war, were very welcoming, and it was heartening to discover that.
Khi trở lại Việt Nam, thì ông thấy con người và đất nước Việt Nam đã thay đổi như thế nào?
I was astounded at the modernization and the prosperity. During my time during the war, I was almost exclusively stationed in very remote parts and never set foot in any city. But when I came into Hanoi, I was absolutely overwhelmed by the youthfulness, by the optimism, and the sort of a hyperactivity among the people. And seeming prosperity and contentment. I was absolutely shocked. It was a really thriving and high energy modern urban city, far from what I expected.
Ông đã bắt đầu như thế nào với lớp dạy tiếng Anh miễn phí này?
I started the free school just on a word of mouth. A few of the people that I met in my first couple of weeks in Hanoi were very helpful in spreading the word. I think our first class were 5 people, and one of the owner of a local coffee shop offered a corner of his establishment for us to teach in. And when we outgrew that, his neighbor who had a restaurant, she offered us her chairs and tables, and we moved there. And the school grew so very fast that the next thing we relied on was the generosity of the local Communist Party. They gave us a meeting room, which we utilized for 6 months, and that really solved our growing problems because it was large enough that we were able to absorb all the students for many months going forward.
Đối tượng học sinh tham gia lớp học của ông gồm rất nhiều thành phần, trong đó có cả các bạn học sinh, sinh viên, người đi làm và có cả những người hưu trí. Vậy thì bài giảng của ông nó có gì đặc biệt để có thể phù hợp được với tất cả các lứa tuổi thưa ông?
Well, the children, they're remarkably absorbent. There's little effort involved in teaching them because they're ambitious, they're hungry to learn, and they pick it up so quickly it's practically effortless. The people who are old like me, that's a different story. And with them it's just patience and persistence. And we sometimes take groups who are having pronunciation problems and separate them and work with them on a one-on-one or in very small groups to correct their pronunciation problems. But yeah, that's the solution. It's the and people who have difficulty with pronunciation, we just give them more attention, and it seems to work quite well.
Vì sao ông lại lựa chọn lịch sử là chủ đề chính trong các bài giảng của mình?
Well, for a very personal reason. I was a personal witness to the suffering and the misery of the people of Vietnam during the war. I mean, I saw it firsthand. And I am very familiar with the sacrifice that the Vietnamese fighters made to win their country's independence. And I think it's very important to keep that in the forefront of the young people's memories. It's important that they remember how their present conditions of prosperity and peace and comfort and safety, how that all came about. And it's very, very, it's a betrayal of the blood and the suffering and the sacrifice that their generations before them made if they should let it fade from their memory and their consciousness. So by using it in our curriculum, I feel that it encourages young people to try to offer a little bit of sacrifice for their country and their fellow citizens by using those martyrs as models of behavior. And that's why we use them in our curriculum.
Để duy trì lớp dạy tiếng Anh thì cần rất nhiều chi phí, như chi phí về sách vở, đồ dùng học tập cũng như thuê địa điểm. Vậy ông đã làm thế nào để duy trì được lớp dạy tiếng Anh miễn phí này thưa ông?
Well, it's been basically made possible through the volunteer work of many young Vietnamese who act as our coaches, through the generosity of the government in providing this classroom space, and through the generosity of some of the local merchants and parents who have donated ink and pencils and paper, and through my own willingness to reach into my pocket and pay for whatever other expenses there are. But I feel like it's the best investment I've ever made in my life, so I have no qualms about it.
Trong tương lai, ông dự định sẽ phát triển lớp dạy tiếng Anh của mình như thế nào?
Well, our great hope is to be able to open more schools, if only we can find a few more foolish people like myself to give up their lives and come here and act as leaders in the organization. Our other hope is that the young people who have come into the school early and have such remarkably excellent pronunciation, that they'll continue working as volunteer coaches and help the school grow. Our other ambition is to try to move into some of the rural areas where there's less opportunity for people to study English and serve those locations as well.
Ông đến Việt Nam với mục đích mang tiếng Anh đến với người Việt. Vậy trong thời gian ở đây, ông có tìm hiểu về văn hóa, lịch sử hay ngôn ngữ của người Việt không?
Well, I'm ashamed to say that my Vietnamese is very weak, which causes me to have great admiration for the Vietnamese who are studying English, because I know what a challenge it is, but they master it. And my success with Vietnamese has been very limited. And yes, I have a very, very passionate interest in Vietnamese history, and particularly the early 20th century colonial period, specifically the conscription that took place in 1916. And I've been searching for information about that since I've been here. Unfortunately, the school project has kept me so busy that I've sort of neglected my other objective. But yes, I do have a very, very passionate interest in Vietnamese history.
Ông có thể nói một vài từ tiếng Việt được không ạ?
Xin chào cồn mèo. Tạm biệt. Tát qua.
Ngoài những lúc lên lớp thì thời gian rảnh rỗi ông thường làm gì?
Well, the the school leaves us very little free time. So my free time is usually spent sleeping or working on lesson plans. I'm not, I think I've left Hanoi 3 times in the 11 months that I've been here. And one was to go to visit Ho Chi Minh's home village, and 2 other trips that I took out was with the people from the Institute of Monument Preservation to visit a 1,000-year-old Buddhist pagoda, and to visit a 16th century meeting house. Both really interesting architectural sites, but that's it. That's my my adventures out of Hanoi. But I came here for a very specific purpose, not as a tourist, so I don't have any complaints about my workload and my lack of vacation time.
Ông dự định sẽ gắn bó với Việt Nam bao nhiêu lâu, và khi nào thì ông có dự định quay trở về Mỹ?
I plan on returning to the U.S. as soon as everyone in Vietnam can speak English.
Tôi nhìn thấy trong nhà ông có bức ảnh Bác Hồ đang treo ở vị trí rất trang trọng. Vậy thì hình ảnh Bác Hồ có ấn tượng như thế nào đối với ông?
Well, my first real knowledge about Ho Chi Minh was when I was in Vietnam when he died, and for some reason the Army newspaper published an obituary about him. And I read his obituary, and I was so impressed, and I thought, this sounds like a really wonderful, admirable man. And how can he be our enemy? And from that time, I developed an interest in him and began reading more and more about him. And I think he was one of the great statesmen of many centuries. I can't think of anyone who's been more remarkably effective and having dedicated his entire life to Vietnam's struggle for independence. And I have his pictures around the house because he serves as a motivator. When things get difficult and I feel a little depressed or disheartened, I look at Ho Chi Minh and feel energized, and I just convince myself that I'm sure there were many times when he felt like things were not going very well, but it was his persistence that brought Vietnam to its current state of peace and prosperity. So he's a role model, a very important role model in my life.
Cảm ơn ông về buổi trò chuyện hôm nay. Chúc cho ông luôn mạnh khỏe để những dự định của ông luôn thành công và ngày càng phát triển hơn nữa. Câu chuyện về người thầy giáo đặc biệt là một cựu chiến binh Mỹ đã quay trở lại đây để mở lớp dạy tiếng Anh miễn phí cho người Việt. Đó là một hành động đẹp. Nó minh chứng cho sự hòa giải giữa hai dân tộc Việt-Mỹ. Nhờ có những hành động tốt đẹp như vậy, chúng ta hoàn toàn có thể tin tưởng vào một đất nước, một xã hội đang ngày càng tốt đẹp hơn. Xin cảm ơn quý vị và các bạn đã quan tâm theo dõi. Kính chào quý vị và các bạn. Hẹn gặp lại quý vị và các bạn trong lần sau. Trong thời gian tham chiến tại Việt Nam, thì điều gì đã khiến ông nhớ nhất?
Well, I have a tremendous number of very unpleasant memories, but I think the most troubling memory for me were some incidences with children. And as I established my own family and raised my children, the memories of those children's experiences and my realization as a parent how my children looked to me for protection and had this powerful belief from any danger. And when I came to understand how children perceive their relationship with their parents, it reminded me of the Vietnamese children who had to suffer the realization that their parents were powerless to help them or protect them or stop the terrible things that were happening. And that troubled me greatly. And I have to say that when I read the diaries of Dat Tui Chum, that was a big influence in my decision to come back, because that really, really helped me understand exactly the suffering of those who fought against the Americans. She personalized that and made it so glaringly apparent, and that had a big impact on my decision to return to Vietnam and do something positive.